Hi, welcome to Low Budget Crash Course World History. My name is Josh Evans, and today we're going to be talking about the great nation of Nigeria. Now, Nigeria is pretty hard to define. Most people would think that Nigeria refers to the legal entity, the state, the country, when in fact it can actually mean much more. Nigeria is also a geographical location in West Africa. Nigeria is also a conglomeration of different cultures and tribes and beliefs, in the same way that fruitcake that your grandmother gets you for Christmas every year is a conglomeration of sin. Because without the binding agent, why would these different tribes or types of fruit be associated with each other in the first place? Come on, that's disgusting. But today we're going to talk about the existence of a unifying government in Nigeria. Ooh, Mr. Evans! What type of government does Nigeria have? That is an excellent question, me from the past. You see, at first Nigeria didn't have a government, but then it kind of had a government, but then it definitely did have a democracy, but then it didn't have a democracy, and then it had a military leader, and then another military leader, and then another military leader, and then yeah, whatever, we're going back. Now, for a long period of time, the geographical location of Nigeria didn't have a central government. It wasn't even a nation in the abstract sense of a unified group of people with similar cultures and beliefs. No, Nigeria was incredibly diverse. They had many tribes, typically with a traditional clan-based form of government. But then everything changed when the colonists attacked. Let's go to the low-budget thought bubble. In the 19th century, many nations driven by imperialist motives sought to form colonies in Africa because of its rich mineral resources. But that required either the enslavement or the killing of many innocent people already living in Africa. So from the mid-1800s up until about 1914, Great Britain continued to increase its presence in the region, calling it Nigeria. Over this period of time, Great Britain extorted the people of Nigeria, forcing them to work on plantations and on other types of farms in order to produce raw materials for the country. Britain used these raw materials and processed them into goods that they used in conflicts such as World War I and World War II. Finally, in 1960, Nigeria declared independence from Great Britain. Thanks, Thought Bubble. So now Nigeria has been established as a nation. But what defines it other than the legal barriers? The reason that I used the analogy with fruitcake earlier is because the tribes in the region weren't very compatible with each other. They constantly had war over things like religion and territory and resources, and now they've all been lumped together into one single legal state. Nevertheless, now these tribes are all together and they need to establish a single form of government that represents everybody inside of this diverse state. How lame is that? In this situation, having a dictatorship is not a very good idea, because it's hard to run a strong government of a large nation with little corruption when a lot of power is held in one person. That is, of course, unless you are, say it with me now, the Mongols. Yes, we're parodying that as well. Nothing is sacred. So first, Nigeria had a coalition government, where a parliament that represented all of the different tribes in the nations got together in order to work together and run the country. So it sounds like an idea that will last for a long time, right? Wrong. They had a coup, and then they had another coup in order to counteract that coup, and then they had another coup in order to counteract the coup that counteracted the first coup, and then after that they had another coup to counteract the coup, which counteracted the coup that So you get the idea, they had a lot of coups. Which reminds me, it's time for the open letter. An open letter to forceful transitions of power. First, let's take a look at what's in the secret compartment. Oh look! It's military assets! Pew pew! Dear forceful transitions of power, why do you exist? When you take a look at nations such as the United States that have been around for over 200 years, you'll notice that most of the time, whenever they have a transition of power, it takes place peacefully and there isn't any violence. However, when you look at nations such as Nigeria back in the early 1960s, you'll notice that whenever they have a coup, it's typically followed by another coup. So obviously, forceful transitions of power, you don't seem like a very good strategy in trying to establish a new government inside of a young state. So then why do you keep doing what you do? Forceful transition of power. Maybe if you want to keep people from overthrowing you, you shouldn't shoot them first. Oh, that didn't fire. What? If you want to keep people from overthrowing you, then maybe you shouldn't shoot them first. Just something to keep in mind. Yours truly, Josh Ebbets. Alright, that's it for the open letter. Luckily, after the fourth coup, Nigeria didn't have very many forceful transitions of power anymore, because in 1979, Nigeria finally established democracy.
Yay, democracy!
Democracy is great, because it means that everybody in the country gets an equal voice, representing themselves in a way that no other form of government can. And from 1979 onwards, everything was going great. Until 1985, when they had another coup. And that admittedly was a pretty rough time for Nigeria. And then they had another coup, and then they had another coup. But then in 1999, many citizens of Nigeria partied like it was 1999, when they had their first democratic election since the 1970s.
Yay, democracy!
Except, maybe not. You see, in order for a democracy to actually be a democracy, it can't just consist of people voting on ballots. In order for a democracy to actually be a democracy, the votes cast by the people actually need to count. If widespread voter fraud takes place on account of the people currently in power in order to get themselves reelected, that doesn't really count as a democracy. However, in Nigeria, the particular party that was using corruption to stay in power from 1999 until recently was the People's Democratic Party. Now, something to keep in mind is that if it has peoples in front of it, it probably isn't very democratic. You know, there's the People's Democratic Republic of Korea, or North Korea, or the People's Republic of China. However, very recently in 2015, an opposition candidate was elected for the first time in Nigerian history. While this may not be good news for the People's Democratic Party, it means that the election carried through successfully without voter fraud, meaning that Nigeria is an actual democracy once again.
Yay, democracy!
So overall, the governing body in Nigeria has experienced many different changes, from tribal rule all the way to a real democracy here today in the present.
Yay, democracy!
Hopefully the 2015 elections are just a sample for what's to come in the future for Nigeria and its newly adopted democracy.
Yay, democracy!
Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to be awesome.